Hi everyone, Jay here from Jade Productions, back with another video. This time we're doing a list breakdown for a competitive list for Orruk Warclans. And the theme for today's list that we've put together has come from a commenter, Finn, who has requested an orc list of mixed orcs using no more crushers, no boar boys, and no savage arrow boys. So we've gone ahead and built that for 2,000 points, put that together, and now we're going to spend time, we're going to break that down, talk about how it's functioned, what's worked in it, how you're supposed to use it, how competitive is it, and changes you can make to alter it based on your personal playstyle, and maybe make it a bit more competitive, or even tone it down a bit, depending on what you're after. So, let's jump straight into it. So, first things first is we've gone with the Great War Allegiance, which is going to let us take advantage of the best of both worlds for Bone Splitters and Iron Jaws. Now, this has gone for not so much a super killy list that is just going to smash into the opponent at all fronts. This list is actually pretty much designed more for a slower pace of game that's going to really play to the objectives more than anything, using certain units to grab objectives and use their power to contest stuff, delay enemies, block them, that kind of thing. And be a much more tactical overall approach to orcs. And it's also designed to be generating, as efficiently as it can, a lot of points early on. It gets you 4 plus D6 war points pretty early on. Now, these 4 plus D6 war points are coming from a couple of your characters. The D6 is coming from your general. And you are going to be starting the game at your minimum 1 level. And then you've got a way of generating command points from a Wargog Prophet, which will let you use here we go, which you combine that with using it from, say, the War Chanter that I've included in the list, or the Mega Boss that's included in the list, while they're surrounded by lots and lots of boys that we've included in here. There's a total of 30, 40, 50, 60, 70 boys in this list, plus an additional 5, 10, 16 additional, essentially knobs. Knobs. So that's that, and you've got a lot of orcs there with which to try and proc that to get as many points as possible as quickly as possible. You're going to achieve stuff fairly early on if you can keep your guys rooted together. And so that's the point, using the Great War Allegiance ability like that. And then hopefully receiving that extra command point from a Wargog Prophet is going to allow you to spend some command points elsewhere, since this army can be fairly command point hungry, but we've gone for, again, something that is a good utility list. So, let's start straight in with a list. After our allegiance, we've got our leaders, we've got our Orruk Megaboss, who is our general. So, he's the Orruk Megaboss, he's pretty much what you expect, he's a nice beat stick. We've taken him on foot, which means he's pretty slow, and to help make up for that, we've given him the Brutish Cunning, which lets him use the Mighty Destroyer's command ability, which you normally don't have access to, as the Great War Allegiance, but the Great War Allegiance allows you to use abilities from other factions that are within the book, so the Iron Jaws. So it's perfectly legal to take this and use the Mighty Destroyer's ability on himself and on the other Iron Jaws in the list. This is the only way to do it. And Mighty Destroyers is very good. It's going to allow him to move 8 inches. It's going to let him run. And later in the game, it's going to let him use it to swing early on in the hero phase. It's going to let him use it on the Orruk Brutes to swing in the hero phase, to make the most out of them, hopefully before they get evaporated, or to move them up the board really quickly. And it's also just a really good ability on top of that. Also potentially letting get a free charge. It's got that nice utility factor, and considering that we've brought Orruk Brutes to serve as a bodyguard, that's where the primary use is going to be. Otherwise, it's a nice use to just get him up there fast. Other than that, there's not a whole lot to say on the Orruk Boss, on the Mega Boss. He's a nice, healthy beat stick who's got a lovely little movement / fight utility ability that we can take advantage of, all for a base cost of 150 points, which is pretty cheap for what his damage potential can be, especially when we buff him. In addition to that, he's got his command ability, which is go on lads, get stuck in, which can give you +1 to hit on a friendly Iron Jaws, and that'll be something if you have the spare points after using here we go, and depending on the situation, you can use that to increase the efficiency of your Orruk brutes. But by the time you get high enough into the Great War table, that's going to become redundant, since you'll get that by default. And the idea with this list is once you reach basically the top levels of the Great War table, you're not going to be doing anything to modify that. That's going to be staying there right at the end, unless you really, really desperately need a Great War. But the idea of this list is to almost never Great War unless you're really desperate, and to just make use of everything else. But go on, lads, get stuck in, makes your Iron Jaws effective early on if you can't get that really quickly and you have a command point to burn, and you want them to be pretty accurate. Otherwise, it's just kind of there. Then we've got an Orruk Warchanter. He's generating you 2 points. He's got the main buffs there, of course, because his Rhythm of Destruction is just... Well, actually, that's the wrong ability. I'm talking about his Violent Fury. The Rhythm of Destruction is just he makes extra attacks with his little sticks. The Violent Fury is what you get when you use it to increase the damage of your Iron Jaws. You can use this to increase the power of your brutes to the levels that you're really going to need them for their points cost and really make the most of them with their Gore Hackers. You can also use it on the Mega Boss to increase him to 3 damage, which is really good as well. And then we've given him the Killer Beat, which is, once again, a kind of redundant beat, which definitely you can stick with it. If you want to, it will become redundant eventually, because it adds 1 to your hit rolls, and most of your Iron Jaws are hitting on 3s anyway, so by the time your Great War kicks in, they're going to be hitting on 2s, hopefully, when you reach those upper levels, but it serves as a nice intermediary until you get lower down. In an alternate, you can actually exchange that, and I would probably make this change if I was rewriting the list again, to instead take the Fix 'em Beat to allow him to heal the Brutes and Gore Grunters that we've included in this list. Then we've got the Weird Knob with Bash 'em Lads. Now, the Weird Knob has Bash 'em Lads, which is a nice bubble of +1 to wound, and it's very good. It can get you to a 1-up wound when you combine it, but once again, it's one of those things, if you're confident you can generate your points very quickly, which I very much am. I put Bash 'em Lads here because I think it's a really good spell, but I would actually trade it out in terms of ways to increase the efficiency of this list, because I've been thinking on this list quite heavily since I put it together a day ago, to replace that actually with the Great Green Hand of Gork is actually the better thing. Bash 'em Lads is, once again, a redundant spell that's very good early on, but it will go away in time. So there is that to keep in mind. Now, on top of that, your Weird Knob, also, he's just there to cast your spells. We have included an Endless Spell for him to try and cast, and the Endless Spell we've picked is just basically a cheap one because we had some points left over, and it will help us face off against things that have magical supremacy. Definitely, I would say exchange Bash 'em Lads here for the Great Green Hand of Gork, but Bash 'em Lads will serve as a nice intermediary and a nice large bubble if you really struggle to get those war points. I would definitely change that up. That's a change I would make to this list. So then we've got the Wargog Prophet. Now the Wargog Prophet's going to be our nice little guy who's our main key to making sure our Savage units work properly. He's going to get us a command point on a 4+ in the hero phase. He's got Breath of Gorkamorka to make our really big units of Savage Orcs that we've got in this unit nice and fast, potentially doubling or even tripling their movement. We've gone and given him our Relic, the Mystic War Paint, which, because he's got such a great spell lore, but he can't cast enough spells, what we've done is we've given him this in an attempt to let him try and randomly fish for the spells that he wants, particularly the other ones, such as the Savage Beast Spirits. And essentially what this, if you don't know what the Mystic War Paint does, it basically, in your hero phase, you roll randomly on the Savage Beast lore table, and you get to attempt to cast that spell in addition to any other spells that you can normally cast. But cherry on top, if you roll a spell you already know, you get to cast it an extra time, or you get to attempt to cast an extra time in addition to its one cast. So that actually breaks the rule of one that exists in the game of casting a spell once in match play. So that's a very good relic. It's very good for him since his spells are all very nice. You might get some mortal wounds stuff, but you are more likely to get an important buffing spell, and even if you get something you already know, like the Breath of Gorkamorka, which we've taken to increase your speed, congratulations, well now you get to accelerate 2 units to breakneck speed, so that's all good. On top of that, he's just a pretty good thing, and he's a bit more survivable in melee, but you don't really want him there. He's definitely supposed to hang back and be spitting out lots of spells all over the place, and supporting these savage boys that we've got here. Then we've got a Wardock, and he's basically your little cheerleader for your Wargog Prophet. We've given him the Brutal Beast Spirits, which will increase the run, charge, and hit rolls for a unit by 1. Rather than attempt to fish for it with the other unit, it's probably wiser to attempt to fish for the other one, which will let you get +1 to your saves of your guys. So it's better to try and fish for that with a Wargog Prophet, because you really desperately need to hit well, and if you can get this spell off and then combine it with later on when you're getting +1 to hit and +1 to wound from your Great War Allegiance ability, you have really now efficient savage boys and really efficient savage boys who now actually have excellent to hit rolls and now excellent to wound rolls. They're going to go up, if you can get the spell off, they're going to be hitting on 2s with their attacks, and they're going to be wounding on anywhere between 3s and 2s. Depending on whether it's the Savage Boys or the Savage Boys. And then on top of that, as I said, he's a little cheerleader, so his main goal is to basically, he can either Glyph Dock Dance to give +1 to the save of your Bone Splitters, which you typically use on the Savage Boys that we've included in the list, who are our nice sort of tar pit of things to suck the enemy into and just sort of screen and take charges. So it's a nice little horde that we've got, just to absorb damage and be nice and defensive. And we can buff it up here on a 3+, taking them from a 5 up to a 4 up in combat with their bone shields. If not, and they're not available, you can always just use the Ritual Dance with the Weird Dock Dance, as it's called, as one of his ritual dances, which will give you add 1 to the casting, dispelling, and unbinding attempts for a Bone Splitters Wizard. So you typically just use that on the Wargog Prophet to make sure that his spells go off nice and reliably. Just because you really, really want those spells. Then that's actually it for the leaders. So you've got some very important leaders here. You've got the Mega Boss providing some nice movement and damage utility combined with the War Chanter. To be able to swing with lots of damage for the Orruk Brutes. You've got the Weird Knob Shaman just for a nice, and the Mega Boss and the Weird Knob Shaman provide some redundancy early on in case you're slow to build up your war points. You can make the list more efficient by swapping out Basham Lads for Great Hand of Gork in order to have your Iron Jaws units that we've included in this list Deep Strike, and there's also another change I'll mention on that you can make the list even more efficient if you want, depending on what kind of style you want to go for. Otherwise, the Weird Knob Shaman is nice at just throwing out some spells, and he's pretty reliable once he's surrounded by a bunch of boys. And his, his green puke's not bad, but essentially, he just has some nice stuff. Just be careful about putting him around too many boys, because there's a potential things can always go bad. Then we've got our battle line. So our battle line for this is we've got 2 5-man units of Orc Brutes with Jagged Gore Hackers and Boss Choppers. This is the slightly better loadout. Now, what you can do with this is, depending on what points level you're playing at, you can actually fold the Orc Brutes into 2 units. Sorry, into 1 unit. You can fold the 2 units into 1 unit, and then you can use the Great Hand of Gork to send them across the field to kill stuff, and then they'll have the 2-inch reach to do stuff, and you buff them up with the Orruk Warchanter before they go. You've got problem with that is that they do have a really low bravery, so the problem with that is that you are going to have a character nearby in order to spend CP, in order to make sure they don't run away during the battle shock phase. Dividing them into 2 5-man units certainly means you have to buff twice as many stuff when you choose to buff them, and one unit is always going to be left without the +1 damage from the War Chanter. But it does mean they're not likely to run as much, and when they do run, it hopefully won't be as devastating. The idea with these is to MSU them as a nice little elite force that can move in between your lines, going after enemy elite units and enemy monsters with their abilities, serving as bodyguards for your characters, and since they're nice and slow, sort of keeping up with them. And once they get in there and hopefully swinging, hopefully, because the rest of this list is really fast, by the time they get in there, they won't be maimed too hard, but they're a nice sort of very anvil in this list that you can go against, but they also provide a massive hammer that you can combo with the other savage units that we're using to hold guys in place. And we've also not taken their trap weapons that they have, those gimmick weapons they have, they're just awful. We've stuck solely with the hacker and boss chopper. If you want to make them slightly more efficient in the 5-man squads, and you want to be banking on higher charges, you can go for the choppers. They'll give you an extra attack at the cost of rend, but being with the gore hackers, they'll be able to fight in 2 ranks, mostly, and they'll be able to save you on pile-ins and do a bit more manipulation stuff, and potentially even keep your things wholly within ranges of auras that they need to be kept into, in case you're trying to do anything with that, such as any of the Mega Boss's abilities. Then you've got 2 units of 3 Gore Grunters. So Gore Grunters are nice heavy cav. They hit nice and hard on the charge in this list if you can get their war points up nice and quickly. And you get some good war point rolls. You can get these to be really, really powerful on the charge with lots of hits and wounds buffs, and they will tear through things. In this particular case, though, we've actually brought them in this list not because of their huge damage potential, but because of their ability to take an objective, to be cavalry that can move, on average, faster than most of your other guys, and to move up, take an objective, and then have the endurance and strength to hold on to that objective. They are mostly our objective nabbers, and that's their primary inclusion in this list. Their same role could be... Now, I know the whole point from the commenter was to make it without Boyz, but their role could be done better by Boyz. But they provide an alternative to it, and he didn't say I couldn't do Gore Grunters, so Gore Grunters are here, and they are a nice utility option, just in general for the Iron Jaws, because they do provide that cavalry unit that can survive out on the flanks, and be nice and beefy and take those. They don't typically live too long because they're in 3s. You could alternatively combine them into a unit of 6 and charge them straight up at the opponent. I wouldn't recommend this. They're definitely better at grabbing the objectives, especially... Now, that's not a general statement, it's just what's for this list, because we have other things that we should be sending straight up there to target the enemy and bury them attacks, and distract them and block them. The Gore Grunters are definitely the blockers and objective takers, and taking objectives from enemies. So, then we've got a unit of 30 Savage Boyz. So this is the horde of our army. The idea with this is it's lots of attacks, it's lots of 2 wound guys with 5 up saves, thanks to their in combat, 6 up saves. The rest of the time they've got their war paint. Actually, no, they don't have their war paint. Not until later on, anyway. Unless when you get your great war points up there. We've given them the stickers so that they can just get lots of attacks. We don't particularly care about getting them to hit and wound well until later in the game, where we want to build up to that as fast as possible. Mostly, it's 30 Boyz that if you can get an aura with here we go, here we go, here we go, that's 3 extra points for the Great War. And they provide a nice little anvil to just tie up the opponent. So, idea is that pretty early on in the game, you're going to cast Breath of Gorka Morka on this unit. hopefully triple it, but at least to double its movement score and fly, and just send it up the board. Just send it up the board so it's a nice big horde of 2-wound, beefy orc naked buggers that have to be dealt with, and they just take up a huge footprint that your opponent now just has to work around. Then in our other units, we've got 2 units of 20 Orruk Boyz. The Orruk Boyz are our nice little berserkers. They're here to provide a different level of hitting power from the Orruk Brutes, where the Orruk Brutes are going to serve as bodyguards in this list, and they're going to focus on killing very much elite units that have high armor or are high wounds value by buffing them, and focusing on tearing down those kinds of units. These Savage Orruk Boyz are basically here to be our primary damage dealers. We're going to use them, essentially, because they've got their 3 attacks hitting on 4s and 3s. The idea is that hopefully we can get our Great War up there, to have them hitting on 2s and wounding on 2s. Then we're going to, and they've got nice bonuses to charge. They're decent at dealing with monsters, and they get a permanent +1 hit if they can kill a monster. They throw out lots of attacks, 3 attacks minimum, 4 attacks if there's 15 or more. So once you lose 5 of them, you're going to be losing that. So the idea is to either use them early on or send them in, and they're pretty much the things that where the Savage Boys go right up the center, these guys are going to go on the flanks of those and deal with things that you actually want to kill, not things you want to hold in place. And then coming up behind them is going to be the rest of your guys with the Orruk Brutes, who are going to be sitting on objectives, holding those objectives from enemy deep strikers and mobility and cavalry, while your gore grunters go and take objectives. And the Boyz will also serve to take objectives as well with their nice bodies, so they allow you to get a nice spread and control over the battlefield with these sheer numbers that you have. You can literally throw 2, 4, 6, 7, 8, 80 bodies right up the field, and literally cover the field in boys and have that nice front row secured, and then your back row can be dealt with Orruk Brutes and your characters who are going to march up more slowly. And then finally in this list we have gone, and just because we came up to 1990, we have gone with just including the Malevolent Maelstrom spell. It's just an okay thing that we can pop off from one of our wizards if we happen to not need whatever spell they're casting. We're an Hobshaman! What was that? And then we can just use that to just do some nice sort of things with exploding mortal wounds and denying things. It's not a particularly great spell, but it was cheap at 10 points, and that shows because it's not great. So that's the general idea of the list. So your characters all work together to provide the early game buffs and generate the points that the rest of your army is going to need to be effective late game, and then charging in and being aggressive with your other units in the early game is also going to increase your Great War points. You're going to use your Savage Boys to block and bunker down enemies and force them to fight that huge horde, while your Gore Grunters go and secure objectives and take and compete against enemy cavalry and outflankers. Meanwhile, your Savage Boys are going to move in for the kill on things that need to be killed, take those objectives. They're the main crux of this, right? The Boys are the real meat of this list, and that they're the real core of this army, and that they're the thing that are going to be doing the jobs that you need to get done. They're the, okay, so those Gore Grunters over there, they took the objective, then they got in, got all charged. Okay, now send those Savage Orc Boys over there to deal with whatever got that objective. Take that objective back, hold it, kill what was there, and that's problem solved. Okay, they're chewing through my Savage Boys pretty quickly. Okay, I'm going to commit a unit of more boys to go in there and hopefully deal with that. Or they're coming around with a horde. I'm going to go deal with that. Meanwhile, in your back row to mid rows, the Orruk Brutes are going to deal with enemy cavalry, enemy deep strikers, things that try to get around, the Caradrons who are trying to play tricks with you, ghosts who are trying to come up out of the front or around you, or guys that come down from the sky. It's okay, Orruk Brutes are going to respond now, deal with those, protect the characters. While the characters go around and do the things that they do best, whether that be buffing, providing movement, damage bonuses, increased magic potential, mobility magic, and general magic aid. Because that is mostly what we've got. We've actually got a very magic-centric orc list, which is something that the Warclans do pretty well. In terms of changes you can make to this list, you could definitely substitute the Savage Boys and the Orruk Brutes out for lots of Ardboys, actually, and you would be very, very effective. Lots of Ardboys is pretty nice. You could probably turn this into a list using the battalion that allows you to recycle Ardboy units pretty easily, which gives you a nice sort of regenerating units to let you really get a horde of units going, and you could really just commit to doing nothing but Ardboys, and then you could cut out the Savage Bone Splitter stuff and just put in another War Chanter and another Weird Knob Shaman, and you could do that, and you'd be fine, and you could still have a very good list, but it would be closer to fighting an attrition battle, and basically your whole goal would be to hold objectives rather than essentially be a bit more utility and being able to respond to any threat, essentially. The problem with that build is it just works better if you're just going to play straight Ironjaws, and just like if you're going to take out all the Ironjaws in this list and replace them all with good old Bone Splitters, it would just work better if you just went entirely for the Bone Splitters allegiance. There is one thing you could do. Now, it goes against the theme of this list that was provided by the commenter. You could take out the Mega Boss, and you could take out the Weird Knob Shaman, and you could probably take out probably some Gore Grunters and a few other things to make room for the points. You'd have to finagle it a little bit to make room for your good old boy that is... Yeah, you probably remove the Orruk Brutes, the Gore Grunters, and and the Mega Boss, and then you try and finagle the points as best you can with alterating stuff in order to fit in Gordrak, who, yes, he's on a Maw Crusher, so he goes against the theme of what was requested for this themed list, but he is very competitive when you're using him in the Great War, because instead of getting D6, you're going to get a flat 6, so combine that, you can generate a lot of points very quickly, and then you can use his Here We Go from him, because he has a huge base to get lots of the Savage Boys units in there, to get lots of points very quickly, and really get those points up there. The whole thing with the Great War is they want to get their war points as quickly as possible, so that is a thing, so that is an adjustment that can be made. You could potentially take out some Orruk Brutes and replace them with Big Stabbers for some suicide units. That's a hilarious option. Personally, I don't really like the Big Stabbers. I don't think they're really super competitive, but they're, in terms of usefulness, Orruk Brutes aren't super competitive either, funnily enough. In here, they're here mostly to serve as a utility unit, and they are battle line, so they're cheaper than cheaper battle line than 5 Ardboys. So that is the thing to consider. Overall, this list in terms of competitiveness is okay in terms of what it's going to be going up against. There's certain lists that, like everything, are just going to tear through it, and you're going to have to really work against it. Ossiarch Bone Reapers are a case where you will struggle against them, but then again, there's not much in the game that doesn't struggle against them, especially if they're Petrifax Elite. If they're not Petrifax Elite, it means your opponent is going easy on you, and you should really thank him for that, but you should probably tell him to stop playing Petrifax Elite when he does do it. Then you've got other armies, which, fortunately, the idea with this list was that you're able to put out almost as much attacks, almost as reliably as Daughters of Cain, and be almost as fast as them. And the idea was to blend the durability that you get from the Ironjaws with some nice backup units, with the aggressiveness and sheer attack power of the Savage Boy units. Overall, it's a good take all-comers list, but it will fall to specialized armies. Certain steamrolling armies with high damage, high attack, something like ogres, are going to be a pain for you. Fortunately, and being Great War, a lot of your Savage Orc units lose their great anti-monster abilities. So you've got that problem to deal with that you can potentially be an issue. A few other lists that, again, you're going to have a problem with are going to be things with high armor saves. You've got some nice magic dominance with some denials. If someone can out-magic you, however, that's going to be an issue because you really rely on the spells in this list. You can definitely falter as an army early on if you're not getting those spells off. You kind of need those. If not, you're going to be stuck going pretty slow for a while, which can actually be to your benefit. If you can actually make that work tactically, depending on your situation. If they deny your spells, it's like, well, okay, my guys are not going to be moving as fast as they normally would, so there's no need to overly commit them. So I might as well just stay back, claim some objectives with some gore grunters, which are kind of disposable objective takers and holders at this point in this list, and just generate some more WoW points so that I'm more powerful later on. So there's that. So that is it for this list. It's actually a really nice list that I really like. It's probably my favorite list that I've built for the Orruk Warclans in a while. It was interesting to work within this theme, because it goes straight away from what is really easy to build and what is generally just super powerful, punch the enemy in the face. With the restrictions that I was given, it's like, okay, you don't have the Maw Crusher, which means you're going to have to play more tactically. You can't just rely on the Maw Crusher and a bunch of Ardboys to just wallop their way through stuff. So instead, let's build this to be sort of magical focused and use that to try and get as many benefits as we can to try and control the battlefield and respond to any threat that comes about. So, I've been Jay from Jade Productions. Thank you for listening. I will be back next time with another list breakdown. If you would like to discuss this list more in general, leave it in the comments below. Feel free to talk about it, what you like to run for Orruk Warclans, things you've seen run. Whether or not if you're new and you want a direction to a place where you can see some competitive lists be built that have been taken to tournaments. That kind of thing. Orruk Warclans are a nice middle to upper middle tier army, so they're pretty good. They definitely are not weak just on the sheer models and units on the face of it, but they definitely have some counters like just about everything else, and there's always a bigger fish. There's always a bigger fish thanks to power creep. Fortunately, in Age of Sigmar, the power creep doesn't get too noticeable until you reach certain factions, which is a good thing. Because of the nature of Age of Sigmar, most things are super killy, but also super fragile, so, you know, as much as you're likely to kill them, you're just as likely to die back really easily. Things die really easy, monsters die really easy, infantry dies really easy. There's a lot of dice being thrown around. When the power creep comes in, it's typically when things don't die and still kill you. That's where the problem arises, and a real problem like that can be something like the Ossiarch Bone Reapers, who are a real struggle for Orruks to take on, and particularly this list. So, once again, I've been Jay from Jade Productions. Happy wargaming, and I'll see you next time.